Christina. Today I am filming from my bed because I just had surgery and I'm not super good at the whole sitting up thing yet. If you are new to this channel, hi! I'm Christina, I'm 22, and I have a rare genetic illness called Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, which is a connective tissue disorder. If you want to learn more about it, I have tons of videos about it, including one called What is EDS? That I will link above and below for you. I also do weekly vlogs, so if you're wondering what this whole thing is about, you can check that out over there. And in those vlogs, I share a lot of my life with you. Kind of all of it. But you guys kind of came into my life at a point where my health was a bit more stable than it has been in the past. And I haven't talked about all my experiences. I've alluded to a lot of them, but usually I just run out of time in vlogs and they get cut out. So I figured I would just sit down and do kind of a more chatty story time video, let you in on a little bit more of my background and how we got from there to here. I'm sure that this will end up being a series of videos, as there are kind of a lot of topics I want to touch on. But today I had kind of a specific story I wanted to tell you because I feel like it might kind of help to explain some things about me, especially my unusual excitement and love for physical therapy. Also, if you hear this kind of annoying noise going on, that is my feeding pump. I can't make it stop. Welcome to my life. Anyway, let's get into the story. So the story starts out at one of the kind of lowest points in my health journey and my life in general. It was, I believe it was March 2015. It's kind of hard to pick a starting date for this story, but that's as good as any. So, as you guys may or may not know, my particular case of Ehlers-Danlos affects me quite severely spinal-wise and neurologically. Crash course: EDS causes defective collagen causes loose ligaments caused my entire spine and skull to become quite unstable. So over the years, I've had to have my entire skull and spine fused with rods and screws and plates and bone. It's just all one piece at this point. And when people think spinal surgery, they think back pain. And yes, there's a lot of back pain involved, but going into a surgery, I don't think that back pain even hit my top 10 symptom list. Because you have to remember that everything you do and that happens in your body, it originates in your brain, and then those signals get sent down the spinal cord and out into the nerves that control whatever it is you're trying to do, which is generally a really great system. Unless, of course, you have something interrupting those signals, like for, say, a vertebra pushing into your spinal cord. Well, then you have a problem. Actually, then you usually have a lot of problems. Okay, so back to that March. This was something I have been dealing with for quite a few years. I was a few surgeries in at this point, but things started to get very critical very quickly. Unfortunately, this is a complication of EDS that just isn't very well understood and therefore isn't treated by many doctors. So my specialist is quite far away. I can't really like pop in and out of my doctor's office. I have to drive like 8 hours to see him, and he's quite busy. So we usually don't head down there until things get pretty bad. I believe at this point I had had brain surgery, skull and neck surgery, and then like lumbar sacral surgery. Your spine has 4 quadrants, the cervical being your neck, your thoracic being your upper and mid back, that's the part that's attached to your rib cage where all your internal organs are. Then your lower back is your lumbar, and like your tailbone is your sacrum. So at this point I had started to develop pretty severe instability in my thoracic spine and in my lumbar spine. The surgeries I had already had were helping with their respective problems, but they were just not enough for what was going on here. My symptoms ended up being pretty weird. It started out with these twitches, so it would just be small at the beginning. It would just be like one finger or my foot, and these just gradually started to get worse until they were affecting my entire body and pretty much looked like full-blown seizures. I also started to have issues with my walking. It would be okay, and so I'd sit up for a while, and after sitting up for a while, it was just like I could feel my legs less and less. I could control them less and less until the point where I'd try to stand up and I would just fall. I put up with that for a while. We had a couple custom braces made, which were super fun to wear. They were nice, like big hard shells, and it left me with these crazy bruises. I wore those for a while. They seemed to help at the beginning, but they started to help less and less, and my seizures were getting worse to the point where it was affecting my diaphragm, which was quite strange. My diaphragm was spasming so much that I was like gasping and gulping in air, but I just could not breathe out, and it was pretty terrifying. The only way that I could really breathe out is if somebody manually pushed the air out of my chest. So that was when we decided to just head down to my surgeon. Now, I should mention that these seizures were not true epileptic seizures that were originating in my brain. These were more nerve-related and spinal cord related. We called them dystonic episodes, dystonias, dystonic seizures. It doesn't really matter what you call it. It's just a fancy way of saying that I was jerking and flailing a whole lot. And these dystonias are a reoccurring symptom of mine, especially when I had instability, but this was like I had never experienced before. So, like I said, we headed down to my surgeon. I was at the point where I couldn't even take off the brace. If I took off my brace, I would immediately start having these seizures and I couldn't breathe. So someone would have to be there to get the brace back on me, even if I just had to like change my shirt. And the pain at this point, there's not even a word for the pain at this point. So my surgeon ordered imaging. He ordered upright flexion and extension MRIs of my thoracic spine. Flexion and extension meaning bending forward and then bending back, and upright meaning I got to sit up. Now, I don't know if you've ever tried having an MRI when you're flailing and can't breathe, but it's an art form, one that I have yet to master. I think I may have given that tech an actual heart attack. I am so sorry. So surprisingly, that imaging wasn't very clear and didn't really show exactly what the problem was in my upper spine, but my imaging did show that I had a recurring issue in my sacral spine. The surgeon decided, okay, well, why don't we do that surgery first and we'll see what symptoms that gets rid of, and then we can revisit the upper spine. Now, I was a little bit frustrated at this point because as the patient, I could feel where these seizures were coming from. It was like electricity coming from my spine, and I could have pointed to exactly in my spine where it was coming from. So I was really confident that my issues were stemming from higher up, and that this surgery in my lumbar sacral area was just going to prolong my suffering. But I didn't have a choice, so we went through with the surgery. And so this is when things start to get a little bit fuzzy. This next part of the story is going to be mostly pieced together memories. Then my memory goes completely blank, and therefore I will be relying on what I was told. I remember going into that surgery, I believe. And then I remember just everything being worse. And I think I saw a lot of different specialists because I remember a lot of different faces that I haven't seen since. And then I remember an emergency room, and I remember a lot of people standing over me. I remember getting a lot of chest compressions, mostly from my mom. And I remember my friend's mom, who was a nurse, who was pressing in on my spine. I remember pain. I remember fear. And then I remember waking up 3 months later here at home in Boston in a rehab hospital. Yeah, 3 months, zero memory. There are existing pictures of me at places doing things during those 3 months that I don't remember at all. My memory loss has never been completely explained, except for probably that it was caused by extreme pain, huge amounts of meds, and trauma. So what had happened in between my lower back surgery and 3 months later in rehab was that my instability only worsened after that first surgery, but but we really couldn't pick it up on any imaging. This was really the early days of thoracic fusions for instability, especially I guess with my surgeon. We obviously didn't want to do a surgery that wasn't going to work. We had to just make sure that this is really what I needed. But in that meantime, when we were just getting more imaging and seeing more specialists, my symptoms were just getting worse. And I was just relying more and more on manual compression, medications, and literally just physically having people hold my spine in place. Ultimately, all of the specialists agreed. They found the areas that were the worst. They fused it. Apparently the surgery went well. Everything healed up great. I was discharged. We were cleared to come home to Boston. But guys, I was drugged. I have got to say that the thoracic spine, especially the upper thoracic, is the most painful area of the spine to have surgery. It's actually where I had surgery 3 weeks ago, and it is a beast. So I was really drugged. I was swallowing pills. This was before we knew that I had a swallowing issue. It was just not good. I was actually able to walk a bit after my surgery. It was at least enough for me to be discharged and for me to get back and forth to the bathroom immediately after surgery. But upon returning home, I started to have walking issues again, to the point where I couldn't even put one foot in front of the other. We had to use a wheelchair just to get me back and forth to the bathroom. And I'm told that they just continued to have more and more issues with the medication that I was on. Sometimes it was not even coming close to touching my pain, and then they were giving me more, and then all of a sudden it was like it would hit me all at once, and my eyes were rolling back, and they were afraid I was overdosing. And they didn't know what was going on then. Of course, we know now I have swallowing issues. So what was probably happening was all of these meds were building up in my chest, and then I was getting them all at once, which I should never have been getting.
I don't really know why I'm making this video, but I'm just really overdrugged. I'm afraid. I didn't take anything. I can't. I don't know what's happening to me. Hi. I just wanted to make a video for my records, or any records, of the fact that I've been on a lot of medication since I had my surgery. I feel like it doesn't do anything, and that, like, if there's pain, the pain doesn't change at all. And, like, I feel like there's just sitting there, like, I can't explain it, but it would, like, start driving, like, hours and hours later, and I feel like they're still there. Every once in a while, like now. And like I feel like a kick, kind of like when you get the like IV and you can feel the medicines. I can't explain it. It's like a moment of like when all of a sudden it just hits you all at once. So it's just happened to me out of the blue, and I feel like I can feel like all of my medication kick in. It just feels really awful. I say things and like in my head, I don't know what to do about it. It's just like I just feel like I'm metabolizing them wrong or something.
I am told that they brought me to the emergency room and I was admitted. I don't know how long I was admitted for. I think that they started me on a taper schedule there to get off some of those meds, and you know, it was nice for my parents not to have to worry about me. Apparently for those 3 months my poor mom was just like sleeping on my floor to make sure that I was okay and that I was still breathing. I mean, I just wasn't in good shape at this point. I was in so much pain that if I tried to sit up or move, I would start to black out. It just hurt too badly. I couldn't walk. I couldn't really hold food down. This was just a really scary time for my family, and part of me is a little bit glad that I have no memory of it. Although I feel really bad when I hear about everything I put them through. Really, all I remember is pain and just really wild, vivid hallucinations. I guess really all I was doing for those 3 months was lying in bed and sleeping. Every time I'd wake up, I'd just get a new dose of meds and it knocked me right back out. I don't know what meds I was on at that point. I don't know the dosages. It doesn't really matter. Now, this is the part of the story that I start to get a little flicker of memory back. I don't remember much and I don't remember details, but I do remember how I felt. And I felt true desperation, like I've never felt before. I didn't know really what was happening. I wasn't that conscious. I just knew that I felt like I was dying. And I don't know if I was. I probably wasn't. But I certainly couldn't go on like that. So I just prayed. I prayed like I had never prayed before. I prayed that God would open a door, any door for me. We were really running out of options at that point. We had no idea which direction to turn. So I just prayed, you know, open a door, any door, and I will run through it. And a door opened. It just so happens that the guy I was dating at the time, his sister had had a particularly bad bout of meningitis and was being followed by a doctor who also worked at one of our local rehab centers. It's actually one of the best rehab centers in the country. His mom was also a doctor. She was friends with this guy. She told him about me and he was able to get me into rehab. This is where my memory comes back. And I gotta say, I was a little bit terrified. I really didn't have a good history with physical therapy. Physical therapists didn't really understand my needs, and in some cases I had ended up with more injuries than I showed up with. But I remembered my promise to God. He had opened that door. I had promised to say yes wholeheartedly to anything that was asked of me and just trust that God knew what was best for me. And so that's exactly what I did. I was admitted on the brain injury unit. And I remember being really confused about that at the time. I questioned why I wasn't on the spinal cord injury unit, but that's just where I ended up, and in hindsight, I was exactly where I needed to be. It completely changed my relationship with God, with my body, with physical therapy. Day one, I walked 3 steps in the hallway, collapsed, and vomited. And then 3 weeks later, I walked a mile through the city with my therapist. Now, I know that that sounds pretty darn miraculous when put that way, and for the most part it was, but it was also grueling at some points. They expected a lot from their patients, and I really felt like I had to constantly prove that I belonged there because this doctor had fought so hard to get me in. I probably will never know the extent of the work that he had to do. My insurance company did not want me to go to rehab because they believed that my condition was too chronic and therefore I was hopeless. And I was very determined to prove otherwise. So I pushed my body to its absolute limits, and I was also withdrawing from heavy medication at the time. So it was not easy. In order to kind of earn your keep, you had to do at least 3 hours of therapy a day. So you would have 1 hour of physical therapy, 1 hour of occupational therapy, and 1 hour of speech therapy. For me, physical therapy and occupational therapy were mostly just getting me walking. My favorite was occupational therapy because we did a lot of fun stuff and got to use the Wii and we cooked brownies and it was really fun. And then in speech therapy, I ended up doing just a lot of like cognitive work, like logic puzzles and word games and stuff like that. It was actually kind of fun, and I did a lot of educational testing as well, so they wanted to see where I fell within the educational system since I actually haven't finished high school due to all of these neurological issues and vision issues, but I did test out of a college level. My biggest regret though at that point is that the speech therapist opted out of testing me for swallowing problems because they hadn't had something like a stroke, and they figured it wasn't an issue if I wasn't complaining about it. And I just wonder how much would be different if they had just done a swallow study, but it's in the past. Anyway, in addition to my 3 hours of mandatory therapy, I usually had 2 more hours of therapy a day depending on what I took on. The schedule was always a little bit different each day, so sometimes I would have recreational therapy, I had music therapy, I signed up for aquatic therapy, which was in the pool. There was group therapy, I tried out a bike that you pedal with your arms, and I signed up for Reiki. And I also did something called the Lokomat. And let me tell you, the Lokomat was pretty cool. It was like these big robotic legs that strapped onto your legs, and they pulled you up on a harness, and you would be standing on a treadmill with a mirror in front of you and bars to the side. You held on to the bars, you looked in the mirror, and the machine started to move your legs like you were walking. And you could feel yourself walking, and you could see yourself walking. And eventually, if you could take over little bits, and the machine would let you do as much as you physically could, but still support you and keep you moving. And that was an experience. Talk about futuristic. But really, my biggest breakthroughs happened in music therapy. Music therapy really just meant, for me, that there was a young man and he had a guitar and he would strum just the same chord at the same pace, and I would walk, and I would have to walk at that pace, and he would change the pace and I would change my pace. And honestly, it was like a miracle. Maybe it's that inner band geek in me just couldn't help but march along to the music. It's really amazing how the brain can use different pathways to process and store things when maybe some other areas are damaged. So I am definitely a huge advocate for any kind of music or art therapy. All about retraining my brain. Another super big breakthrough was when they put an abdominal binder around my hips and lower back as tight as they could, and it was like immediately I had better feeling in my legs and better control, which should have been our first clue as to what was really going on. Things I didn't like about being in an inpatient rehab center. Number one, I always had to have a spotter. Totally understand this one, but it was still really frustrating. Someone always had to be within arm's reach of me, spotting me while I walked or moved, and this included the toilet and the shower. Think about that one. If I so much as hung my leg off the side of the bed while I was sleeping, all the alarms went off. It was a tad bit much, but I understand the implications. If I were to fall on their watch, they'd be in some serious trouble. And so would I. I also hated waking up early. When you were there, you followed a strict schedule. And morning meds were given quite early. And all of my Lokomat sessions were actually scheduled before the gyms even opened. So I had to wake up extra early. You guys know that I am not a morning person. I was also prescribed a medication to help me to sleep. I still take it. It's actually kind of great. But at the time, I did not like it. I wasn't super thrilled to have even my sleeping put on a schedule. Of course, I never voiced any of these complaints because really, the experience was so amazing and everything offered to me was so wonderful that there was really no reason for me to complain. These things just come with being in a hospital. That entire experience was completely life-altering. When I left, I walked out of there. 3 weeks before, we didn't know if I was ever going to walk again. Now, I'm not gonna lie, I walked a little bit awkwardly. Still kind of do, honestly, but in a different way. When you have to say to yourself, okay, bend knee, lift foot, heel, toe, swing your arms, breathe with every single step, it kind of shows. The biggest negative about it is I did leave with some new issues that I didn't really have going into it. I was having some new pain in my neck and shoulders, which actually ended up with me having to have more spinal fusion done. they didn't really know a whole lot about EDS or about my specific needs. So when doing exercises, my neck wasn't really protected as much as it should have been. Do I think that this was inevitable? Yes, I do. I think it was. But I do think that my time there and the heavy exercise sped up my degeneration a little bit. And unfortunately, after my neck, my lumbar followed, the rest of my thoracic. I also think that was quite inevitable, and I think that was really the root of my walking problems. After I had those surgeries and I was fused, I no longer had to say in my head, okay, pick up your foot, move this, do that. It was like there was a loose connection and someone was jiggling the wire and they finally got it right. So I feel like those surgeries were what I ultimately needed, but because I spent that time in rehab, I went into those surgeries so much stronger than I would have otherwise, and I completely credit that for my successful recovery. I really don't know how I would have done had I had all of those surgeries at once. I was just incredibly weak. Well, after my time there, my entire life has changed. Not a day goes by that I don't think about it or use some kind of tip that I learned there. And that is what really sparked this love and this passion for physical therapy. Once I was discharged from their inpatient rehab, I continued to go to their outpatient rehab a handful of times a week. And it was okay. It wasn't the same. I actually quite missed my time inpatient. I loved being there. I gotta admit, I think I learned to actually like a little bit of routine. I liked all my therapists there, and the room and the view were amazing. I missed that. It was just a little bit of a difficult transition coming back home. But ultimately, I didn't end up sticking with their outpatient rehab program. I got wind from a surgeon that there were a couple physical therapists within driving distance of me who really specialized in EDS. One of them I had actually seen many years before, so I figured, heck, you know, it's worth a consult. And if you guys watch my vlogs, you kind of know it's history from there. Once I met and had my consult with my therapist, Trish, I have scarcely missed an appointment. I go twice a week, even though it's 2 hours away. It is my main tool. It is my main treatment. It is my main source of pain relief. Sometimes it's my main source of social interaction for the week, which probably is really sad. And having a therapist that specialized in EDS just made that much more of a difference. I mean, I cannot even explain to you how different. The practice I'm going to now might not have a fancy locum mat and robotics, but they do manual therapy, which is the #1 most important thing in my book for EDS patients. She puts my entire body in alignment. That way I can do my exercises properly using the correct nerves and muscles. And she really watches me closely and makes sure that I'm working as a full body so I don't further injure myself like I did in the past. So has it all been uphill and fine and dandy since then? No. I've had, well, a few more surgeries since then. I actually lost and then regained the ability to walk 2 more times due to neurological complications. But nothing really as severe as this first experience. And this time I was confident, I was educated, the tools I needed, and I knew exactly which direction to turn. And that made all the difference. I knew I could do it once, so I could do it again. And I did. I think I better stop my story here and let this be the first installment of my story times. I do have a lot more stories to share with you, so let me know if this is a style of video that you enjoy watching. If it is, you can give it a thumbs up. You can let me know in the comments. And if you want to see more videos, you can subscribe and even hit the bell if you really want to see them. Oh, well, I need to lie down. I will see you guys next time.